I might be just a couple days late on this one, but here are the top weather stories for the year 2024 in Canada, eh?
There it is. This is bad news.
My God.
Falling out right now.
Anything could happen.
Get on!
Wow. I'll watch the video later.
Few more blankets of water.
They dry mopping this. Although David Phillips is retired from Environment Canada, they are going to continue with making a list every year of the top 10 weather events from the year before. And 2024 was a big year. It was Canada's most expensive year for weather disasters. Extreme weather events affected millions of people. Floods and damaging hail, extreme temperatures and devastating wildfires were on the menu. Severe weather events left marks on communities and on the ledgers. According to catastrophic indices and quantification for weather events in July and August alone resulted in $7.7 billion in insured damages in Canada. The human toll was severe. A brutal cold snap in January claimed dozens of lives in Western Canada's homeless population, while flooding events in British Columbia, Quebec, and Nova Scotia added to the year's fatalities. Alberta experienced 4 of this year's most impactful events, including another destructive hailstorm in Calgary that caused $2.8 billion in insured losses. This is the costliest weather event in 2024 in Canada, and the second costliest overall in the history of the nation. With the rising cost of events like these, it reflects our expanding communities and increasing property values. There's a deeper story at play, though. Climate change is accelerating far beyond natural rates due to human influence. Climate change is intensifying the frequency and severity of certain kinds of extreme weather events. Extreme heat events are becoming much more likely. Results from rapid extreme weather event attribution systems showed that the heat that scorched the Maritimes in June, Western Canada in July, and parts of the Arctic in August was made much more likely by human influence on the climate. In the case of Canada's Arctic, this summer's hottest heat waves were made 10 times more likely by human-caused climate change. These extreme temperatures also increased wildfire risk, bringing hot, dry conditions that contributed to the intensity of wildfires in Labrador, but also Jasper, Alberta, that destroyed 30% of that town. Extreme rainfall events like atmospheric rivers that struck British Columbia, or the severe urban flooding caused by thunderstorms in Toronto, and the remnants of tropical cyclones that hit Montreal this year are becoming more likely. As our atmosphere warms, more moisture can become available to feed these storms. That increases the potential for heavy rainfall and increases the likelihood of excessive flooding. Nowhere are these changes more dramatic than in the Arctic, which is where warming is 3 times faster than the global average. There are significant impacts being felt by Arctic communities there. In September 2024, the Canadian Arctic reached its second lowest ice coverage on record. By late that month, the northern route of the Northwest Passage had the least amount of ice it's ever had. Human-caused climate change is increasing extreme weather, and its impacts are being felt now. Number 1. From heat wave to wildfires, Jasper's summer inferno. July was exceptionally hot and dry in Jasper National Park. Skies withheld much-needed rain. Daytime temperatures soared above 30 degrees Celsius on many days through the month. Drought conditions worsened as the park's vast wildlands and pine forests baked under the relentless heat. By July 21st, the mercury reached a sweltering 38 degrees Celsius. The fire danger index became extreme. Strong thunderstorms developed in the evening of July 22nd, with powerful lightning bolts flashing as the storm swept through the park. The first wildfire was spotted late that afternoon. Just a few kilometers northeast of the Jasper town site, it was seen, followed by a second wildfire, which was several kilometers to the south. By 9:59 p.m. that night, the entire national park was under an evacuation order as wildfires spread rapidly. This resulted in the closing of the highways south and east of Jasper. Nearly 5,000 residents and the town's 20,000 visitors were forced to flee westbound on Highway 16 into British Columbia. This was the only remaining escape route. Ash was falling onto vehicles, and the southern skies were glowing an eerie orange. On July 23rd, the southern fire surged in size, fueled by strong winds that pushed it through vast forest canopies and up entire mountain slopes. Billowing columns of copper-tinged smoke rose high above the Rocky Mountains. Then came the big day, July 24th. By late afternoon, gusty winds caused the southern fire to suddenly intensify. It began racing towards the town site. Forced into retreat, Firefighters could only watch as an unstoppable wall of flames breached the southern outskirts of town by 6 p.m. It was launching fireballs hundreds of feet above the trees. The fire was so intense, it generated its own thunderstorm. Pyrocumulonimbus thunderstorm. Lightning flashes were detected several kilometers northeast of the fire, where smoke had blackened skies to the point that streetlights turned on in the town of Hinton. This is 66 kilometers away. By 6:40 p.m., the fire began to move into the Jasper town site. Showers of flaming debris were scattered across the town as toxic smoke filled the air. Firefighters worked relentlessly and tirelessly to protect critical infrastructure and put out new fires when they emerged. Only firefighters fitted with special breathing apparatuses could stay to battle the fire. Distressing images of iconic buildings in the town started to surface on social media. Many people were speculating about the fate of the town. 12 millimeters of rain fell the next day. It was too little, though, and too late. A charred landscape was all that remained of the forest that stood to the south and east of the town only a day earlier. The smell of musty smoke hung in the air above structures that were reduced to ashes. By July 25th, the two fires merged. Evidence of significant wind damage later emerged near Wabasso Campground just south of Jasper. A swath of mature forest was leveled, scrap metal was wrapped around trees, and a 6,700-pound, 20-foot sea container had been thrown over 100 meters into a nearby river. The suspected cause was an intensely rotating column of air generated by the fire itself, a fire tornado. The wildfire claimed 358 of the town's 1,113 structures, including many homes, the iconic Moline Lodge, and nearly a 100-year-old church. The tireless efforts of the fire crews undoubtedly saved many buildings. No critical infrastructure was lost, and the early evacuation of the town's residents was credited as a notable success. Tragically, a firefighter lost his life on August 3rd. Insurance losses probably reached around $880 million, making it the second costliest wildfire disaster in Canadian history. It surpasses the $700 million lost in the Slave Lake fire and trails the $4.5 billion Fort McMurray wildfire of 2016. The Jasper wildfire complex was declared under control on September 7th. It had consumed 32,722 hectares of forest.
I'm not getting hit by Debbie.
You're not?
Base guy is.
Okay.
Central Canada took the brunt of some of 2024's hurricane season. This is number 2 on the list. This includes Hurricane Beryl. On July 2, Beryl became the first ever Atlantic hurricane to attain Category 5 intensity so early in the season. It had winds of 270 kilometers an hour as it moved westward into the Caribbean Sea near Grenada. But July 8th, it had weakened to a Category 1 hurricane and made landfall along the Texas Gulf Coast. After moving inland, it transitioned into a post-tropical system, triggering flooding and several tornadoes as it moved across the United States. Although it had lost its tropical cyclone characteristics, the remnant storm system remained loaded with moisture. But July 10th, it reached southern Quebec. Between 50 and 100 millimeters of rain fell within a few hours, causing widespread flooding. Muddy floodwaters inundated roads and underpasses in parts of Montreal. 12,000 people lost power. The sewers were backed up, basements were filled with water, and businesses were flooded. The remains of Beryl moved into the Maritimes on July 11th, issuing a deluge of water across Nova Scotia. Nearly a month later, the remnants of Tropical Storm Debbie would trigger another round of destructive flooding. Debbie made landfall as a hurricane in northwestern Florida before tracking through the southeastern United States and made a second landfall in South Carolina. Once it moved inland, it transitioned into a post-tropical low-pressure system, generating flooding rains, damaging winds, and tornadoes. On August 9th, it arrived in central Canada. By early morning, the skies opened up over Ontario and Quebec, delivering heavy downpours on and off through the day. 80 to 120 millimeters of rain fell across the capital region, creating torrents of water that damaged roads and washed some out completely. Areas west of Ottawa were particularly affected, with hundreds of basements flooded in West Carleton. In Akwesasne, there was reports of flooded roads and basements. Meanwhile, across southern Quebec, a drenching rain came over a 24-hour period that brought up to 200 millimeters of rain in some parts of the St. Lawrence Valley. Severe impacts occurred from the Outaouais region to the eastern townships. This included Montreal and the Laurentians, and also some other areas in Centre de Quebec. A substantial 154 millimeters of rain fell at Montreal International Airport on August 9th, setting an all-time record high. More than 1,000 homes were flooded across southern Quebec, the soaking rains caused slopes to slump and slide. Floods damaged 170 roads. In the Maurice region, a man lost his life when a roadway collapsed. And as the storm system departed, wind gusts as high as 95 kilometers an hour swept through the region, cutting power to 550,000 customers. The flooding from Debbie was the costliest in Quebec history, $2.5 billion of damage, which would actually surpass the long-standing record of the ice storm in 1998 if it was adjusted for today's dollars. Number 3 was the deep freeze in Western Canada in January. In January, a particularly cold Arctic air mass went into Western Canada, causing a reversal in temperatures from north to south. Some areas of the Arctic saw unusual warmth, with winter rainfall and temperatures above freezing. This caused water to pool on snow and ice in eastern areas of Nunavut. Meanwhile, parts of BC, Alberta, and Saskatchewan endured an Arctic chill not felt in decades. Temperatures plunged into the minus 40s across Canada's 3 most western provinces. The coldest wind chills were dipping into minus 50s. Between January 11th and 15th, over 60 daily minimum temperature records were broken across British Columbia. Alberta saw 125 daily maximum temperature records broken, including 8 all-time cold records from January 10th to 17th. Saskatchewan saw nearly 25 daily minimum temperatures and only 1 all-time cold record temperature broken. British Columbia's coldest temperature of the event occurred in the Caribou region at Puncie. Congratulations, Martina. You get this one. Minus 48.4 degrees is the official record that they have set. So your thermometer was pretty darn close. In fact, it was probably quite accurate where you were. Temperatures went to minus 48 at weather stations in central and northern Alberta, and Saskatchewan saw minus 46 at the Leader Airport. The coast mountains of BC acted as a dam to the frigid air, keeping that coldest air from reaching the shores of the Pacific. But the dense, higher pressure air breached the mountain chain through the gaps like the lower Fraser Valley and Howe Sound, bringing Arctic outflow winds with gusts of 60 to 80 kilometers an hour out to the coast. Bitterly cold winds reached Vancouver's palm tree-lined waterfront. They experienced wind chill values in some places on the south coast as low as minus 30. Impacts from the cold were significant and widespread. 500 flights were canceled across Western Canada. Airport equipment and de-icing fluids stopped working, and airline operators limited the time that ground crews could work outside in the dangerous cold. In Alberta, motorists in need of roadside assistance faced wait times of over 96 hours for battery boosts, tows, and winches. Between January 9th and 17th, the Alberta Motor Association received 49,000 calls for assistance, the busiest in its 100-year history. Multiple ski resorts across Canada closed because of the risk of hypothermia and frostbite. In Siksika Nation, a local state of emergency was issued when a gas service outage left residents of more than 50 homes unable to use their furnaces. The cold didn't spare the fruit trees in British Columbia, an area known as the fruit basket of Western Canada. In Kelowna, temperatures hit minus 30 in the morning of January 13th. Penticton hit an all-time low of 27.6. And following a warm start to winter, the delicate buds that appeared on trees there all across the region. But by early January, this freezing did cause most of those trees to take a lot of damage, significant losses. Farmers were forced to plant other kinds of crops for the year. Burst pipes and broken heaters wreaked havoc in buildings and hospitals in Western Canada. In Mission, the Memorial Hospital closed their emergency department after a burst pipe. The Royal Inland Hospital there had temperatures of minus 6 after a heater broke. And Edmonton's Royal Alexandria Hospital, it was forced to divert patients to other hospitals because its waiting rooms lost heat. In Saskatoon, a burst sprinkler caused flooding in the main entrance and basement of St. Paul's Hospital, and Regina City Hall had to close because of a burst pipe. Alberta set its all-time provincial record for power demand, and on the evening of the 12th, BC did the same. On January 13th, an emergency alert was issued in Alberta urging residents to reduce power consumption to avoid rotating power outages. It was the first ever emergency alert of its kind in the province, successfully prompting Albertans to act immediately. The cold had a significant impact on the homeless population. British Columbia attributed 36 deaths to the cold in the first 2 weeks of January. And Alberta emergency rooms filled with the cold-related illnesses throughout the cold snap. The multi-day extreme cold resulted in approximately $180 million in insured losses across British Columbia, Alberta, and Saskatchewan. Number 4 was the atmospheric rivers that dealt double blows to British Columbia. Each year, 30 to 40 atmospheric rivers reach coastal British Columbia, typically delivering beneficial precipitation that replenishes mountain snowpacks and water supply. In 2024, atmospheric rivers contributed to dangerous flooding, deadly landslides, and road washouts across southwestern BC. On January 26th, a series of Pacific storms brought widespread heavy rain to southwestern BC, fueled by several atmospheric rivers. Rapid runoff led to flooding. Between January 26th and February 1st, over 200 millimeters of rain fell over the high terrain in parts of BC's South Coast region. When atmospheric rivers like those of late January tap into Pacific moisture originating near the Hawaiian island, they're known as the Pineapple Express. These events produce heavy rain and bring warm temperatures with freezing levels rising above zero in the mountain heights. This can result in rain falling on snowpacks, which leads to rapid melt and runoff. On January 30th, Pemberton, about 150 kilometers north of Vancouver, declared a local state of emergency when flooding led to several property evacuations. Heavy rains prompted flooding in Squamish, Sumas, and Lillooet rivers. A stretch of Highway 1 through the Fraser Canyon north of Lytton was closed due to flooding and debris was on the road. In parts of Fraser Valley near Abbotsford, agricultural lands were covered in water. Heavy rain and warm temperatures exposed grass and dirt on the ski hills and North Shore Mountains, melting the snowpack and closing all the ski resorts in Metro Vancouver. During the last week of January, the unusually mild Pacific air broke over 100 daily high record temperatures. This was just a few weeks after breaking all those low temperature records. So we had extremes in January. Now we had another atmospheric river that was significant on October 18th, just passed. And that was a weekend, if you recall, when an atmospheric river hit southwestern BC. It claimed the lives of 5 people. It brought high winds that disrupted ferry services and downed power lines through the region. Southern Vancouver Island and other populated regions in the lower mainland were hit hard with high winds and flooding. This was right in time for the October 19th provincial election. This made people say that the government caused the storms. I remember that. Daily record rainfall was recorded across the region, with many stations in Metro Van recording 100 millimeters on Sunday, October 20th alone. By weekend's end, West Vancouver had 203 millimeters, while Coquitlam had recorded a staggering 256 millimeters. But it was the Kennedy Lake Station on Vancouver Island that took the day with 318 millimeters. Torrents of muddy water cascaded over roadways in communities near the North Shore Mountains. Homes and basements were flooded. Tap water turned cloudy after upstream reservoirs were filled with murky mountain runoff. Agricultural land in Abbotsford and parts of Fraser Valley again suffered flooding in its fields and buildings. Tragedy struck in Coquitlam. 2 people lost their lives there. On the 19th, a local teacher died when a mudslide swept her home off its foundation. On the 20th, a man died after falling into the Coquitlam River while walking his dog. On Vancouver Island, 2 more people died in separate incidents while driving on a flooded road next to the Sarita River in Banfield. A hiker also passed away on a trail on Grouse Mountain at this time. While these atmospheric rivers brought destructive flooding and loss of life, they also highlighted the complex nature of these weather systems in BC. The same intense rainfall that caused widespread damage helped alleviate severe drought conditions throughout the coastal central and southern British Columbia regions, demonstrating how these powerful weather phenomena can be destructive and beneficial at both the same time. Number 5, Calgary's costliest weather disaster. And I was in Calgary in 2010 when their previous weather disaster happened. Now, people in Alberta call this Hailstorm Alley. They're not strangers to these kinds of thunderstorms. Calgary is recognized as the hail capital of Canada. Less than 5 years after the last billion-dollar weather event in the city, another devastating hailstorm had happened in August. This was on the 5th. 2 intense rotating thunderstorms erupted along the southern foothills and moved towards Calgary. The southern storm dropped baseball-sized hail as it plowed through rural lands south of the city, while the northern storm battered thousands of homes and vehicles across Calgary's northern suburbs. The hailstorm of June 13, 2020 was once thought to be as bad as it could possibly get. Videos captured hailstones smashing through windows and landing on living room floors. Cars parked outside looked like they'd been pelted with a hammer. The storm swept over Calgary International Airport. Stormy ice water poured in through a terminal roof. Flights were canceled and 10% of one airline's fleet was grounded for several weeks due to severe damage. Elsewhere, torrential rains from the storm caused severe flooding, and hail chilled the air as it painted the landscape white like it was winter. Nearly 1 in 5 Calgary homes was impacted by the storm, resulting in 130,000 insurance claims. More than half of these claims were for vehicles, many of which were write-offs. After leaving the city, the storm moved southeast, carving a swath through maturing crops, known as the Great White Combine. The hail damage from both storms was so extensive their tracks left scars in the land that were visible from space. The storm caused $2.8 billion in damage. Number 6. Southern Ontario's Summer of Floods. July 15th to 16th, numerous thunderstorms tracked across southern Ontario. Early in the morning of the 15th, the first cluster of storms entered southwestern Ontario from the state of Michigan. Several rounds of storms rumbled their way eastward into the Golden Horseshoe region that afternoon. In 4 hours, 50 to 60 millimeters of rain doused the London area. This flooded roads and basements and closed a stretch of Highway 402 west of the city. Further east, 60 mils fell over 6 hours in the Hamilton and Burlington areas, flooding homes, streets, and businesses. In Toronto, 25 millimeters of rain hit in just 1 hour, flooding 2 subway stations, along with parts of Lakeshore Boulevard. That wasn't all, though. On the morning of July 16th, storms lined up again across southern Ontario, but this time they aimed squarely at Greater Toronto area. The ground was already saturated from the previous downpours. When the precipitation fell with just a few hours, it triggered widespread flash flooding. The heaviest rain fell over parts of Mississauga, where 97.8 millimeters of rain filled the gauge at Pearson International Airport. Downtown Toronto recorded 83.6 millimeters of rain, and 87 mils fell at Billy Bishop Airport on the Toronto waterfront. Many multi-lane freeways like the 401, 410, 404, 400, and 427 were flooded. In downtown Toronto, sections of Lakeshore Boulevard and the Gardiner Expressway were underwater. Calls for emergency services poured in. The Don Valley Parkway on July 16th had dozens of vehicles stranded when murky water covered sections of the roadways. This had to lead to 12 water rescues. Commuters faced chaos downtown when flooding turned staircases at Union Station into waterfalls, and nearby subway stations were closed as water surged into the underground transit system. At the time, a significant power outage affected 300,000 customers beyond downtown and beyond. In Mississauga, the fire department conducted multiple water rescues, and over 100 residents of a nursing home had to be relocated. In the Kitchener-Waterloo-Cambridge area, flood-related calls surged as roads, trails, and parks were inundated. Kitchener saw a section of railway tracks that was left suspended in the air after the ground beneath it completely washed away. By the time the July 15th-16th rainstorms had ended, $940 million in damage was recorded. But just weeks later, on August 17th and 18th, a slow-moving low-pressure system brought another round of severe flooding into the region. The trouble began the morning of August 17th when a thunderstorm produced a damaging tornado in the town of Ayr. The tornado rated EF2 with winds over 180 kilometers an hour, which toppled trees, damaged buildings, and tossed vehicles along a 7-kilometer-mile track. Then thunderstorms began bringing torrential rain into Mississauga and parts of Toronto once again. Roadways were flooded, people were affected, people were required rescue from stranded vehicles and stuck elevators. One person was rescued in Mississauga, clinging to a flooded intersection on a light post. Segments of major highways were flooded, like the 401, 403, and 410. International Airport there received 128.3 millimeters of rain in a single day. Flights were grounded that day. This caused significant delays. Billy Bishop Airport out in Lake Ontario, though, stayed dry. In Mississauga, things got even worse on the afternoon of the 18th. On the Highway 410, local fire departments had to deploy a small boat to free the occupants of several stranded vehicles. The floods on August 17th and 18th in the GTA caused over $100 million in insured losses again. This brought the combined cost of flood damage across the region to $1 billion for the year. Number 7 is the unusual heat wave in the Arctic. Between August 6th and 10th, temperatures like 30 degrees Celsius were felt in the Northwest Territories. 200 kilometers north of the Arctic Circle, where the taiga forest meets the Mackenzie River Delta, lies the town of Inuvik. On August 6th, 7th, and 8th, temperatures there soared above plus 30, which is 10 degrees above normal temperatures there. The temps broke records and forced residents of the Northwest Territories to find a way to keep cool. For relief from the heat, the Inuvik Fire Department created a pop-up water park there for children, spraying water in the air. And for the first time ever, an emergency cooling shelter was set up at the curling rink. On August 7th, the town recorded its highest all-time temperature at 34.8 Celsius. That night at midnight, it was still 27 degrees because the sun hadn't gone down really. On August 7th, Aklavik hit 33.1 C, and on August 8th, Fort McPherson set the all-time record for the day at 35.1 C. On the southern shores of the Arctic Ocean was the town of Pawtucket. It hit an all-time high of 31 on August 8th. A little further south, Toledo hit 34.6 on August 8th, while Fort Good Hope set all-time records for 3 straight days. It hit a sweltering 37 degrees Celsius on the 9th. The extreme heat increased the fire risk across the Northwest Territories, which faced another active fire season. 5.3 million hectares were burned in Canada in 2024. 1/3 of that was in the Northwest Territories alone. Number 8, Cape Breton's winter wallop. The trouble began when an intensifying low-pressure system stalled off the coast of Nova Scotia February 2nd to 5th. Winter storm systems typically travel along with stronger winds high in the atmosphere, but upper winds around this storm were notably weak, enabling it to become parked in one place. Drawing from a steady supply of moisture, the expanding storm system brought heavy snow and gusty northerly winds across Atlantic Canada for an extended period. Sydney, Nova Scotia, the snow kept falling there and coming. From Friday, February 2nd, all the way to Monday the 5th, a total of 100 centimeters was reported in downtown Sydney, 97.1 centimeters recorded at the airport.
Hey everybody, it's Frankie down with Sydney, Nova Scotia as 150 centimeters of snow on the ground. It was really bad. It snow started on Friday evening, lasted through Saturday and Sunday. It was a 2-day blizzard conditions had to happen in Sydney, Nova Scotia on Saturday, and the Sunday started on Friday night. And Sydney, Nova Scotia is under state of emergency. As of right now, I'm doing great so far. Things are going great. It's confirmed Sydney, Nova Scotia is under state of emergency. Plows around the road, plowing the streets and things like this. It was really bad. They got snow plows currently plowing the streets. Right now, they're trying their best in my hometown, Sydney, Nova Scotia. It was so much snow that happened in my hometown.
On Sunday the 4th, Cape Breton Regional Municipality declared a state of emergency. The storm's impacts were not limited to Cape Breton, though. Heavy snow blanketed much of central and eastern Nova Scotia, along with Prince Edward Island, who had 40 to 65 centimeters accumulating across the region. Winds were strongest near the coastal areas, reaching 70 to 80 km/h gusts. The strong winds reduced visibility, disrupted marine Atlantic ferry travel, and contributed to power outages that saw 9,000 customers, mainly in Nova Scotia, left in the dark. Schools and businesses and services were closed throughout Nova Scotia and Prince Edward Island on the Monday. Postal services was suspended and 70 flights were canceled at Halifax Stanfield International Airport, where 80 centimeters of snow had fallen over the weekend. Halifax recorded its snowiest February of all time, and Sydney its third snowiest, amid an active winter marked by frequent storm systems where the eastern Maritimes were really hammered. The winter storm was the worst hit this part of the Maritimes since White Swan. That was a powerful winter storm in 2004. It caused significant impacts to the region at the time. In the Sydney area, it was the largest multi-day snow event since the winter of 1992 when 102 centimeters fell at Sydney Airport from January 31st to February 4th. Number 9 was the summer split. Maritime Sizzle while Alberta shivers. On July 19th, Miscou Island in New Brunswick recorded an all-time high of 34.1 C. Miramichi hit 37.2 in the same province, and Ingonish hit 34.5. This set new monthly all-time records. Prince Edward Island also saw its highest June temperature when the Cape Breton area soared to 34.9 Celsius. The highest temperature of the day, however, was in Bathurst, New Brunswick. The mercury hit 37.6 degrees Celsius there. It's the highest temperature dating back to 1872 ever recorded there. In fact, it's the highest temperature ever recorded in the entirety of the whole Maritimes for the month of June. In St. John, New Brunswick, temperature hit 34.5 on the 20th, while Halifax Airport set a new June record of 34.3. Temperature records were being set in Newfoundland and Labrador. Terra Nova Park hit 35.4, which tied its all-time record. Schools without air conditioning across New Brunswick either closed or were canceled for the day. Salmon pools in the Miramichi River were closed for fishing to protect the salmon as they sought refuge in cooler waters. But Western Canada got the cold shoulder. While Eastern Canada endured the stifling heat, Western Canada was left out in the cold. Alberta set 46 daily record low temperatures across the province between June 15th and 20th. Sandwiched between the two strong upper ridges, the jet stream buckled into a trough over the western prairies. This brought unusually cool and dry air into the region. despite the fact it was the summer solstice, the weather across Alberta felt more like January. The coldest temperature came on the morning of June 17th. Jasper, Crow's Nest, Sundre, and Cardston all recorded sub-zero temperatures, while Waterton Park plunged to minus 4.8 Celsius. Frost warnings extended from Calgary to Edmonton and beyond, prompting gardeners to protect their plants. If the frost wasn't enough, snow would soon follow. On the morning of June 18th, flakes flew from Crow's Nest to Banff. Snow accumulated west of Calgary. The heaviest snow blanketed the ranch lands just west of Nanton, where my friend Lance Thurie's ranch is, where a whopping 30 centimeters of snow fell. And finally, number 10, wildfires and evacuations in western Labrador. June in Labrador was warmer and drier than average. On June 13th, lightning ignited a wildfire several kilometers southwest of Churchill Falls, a town of 750 residents, and also home of the second largest hydroelectric power generating station in Canada. Initially, cooler temperatures kept the fire growth at minimal, but the heat soon returned. On June 19th, temperatures hit 32.6 Celsius in Churchill Falls. This made for extreme fire behavior. High temperatures and gusty southwest winds caused the fire to intensify. Residents were directed 287 kilometers east along the only connecting route towards Happy Valley, Goose Bay, as lightning flashed overhead. Many sheltered with family and friends, while others stayed at the local YMCA. The province issued a fire ban across Newfoundland and Labrador and focused its resources on controlling the blazes. A small crew of hydro workers remained in Churchill Falls to operate the power plant. The Labrador River, to the south of the town, acted as a natural barrier to the fire's northward spread. As crews worked to contain it over the coming days, by June 25th, though, it was warm and windy conditions that drove the fire across the river. This triggered evacuations of the remaining hydro workers there. The fire advanced within 3 kilometers of town before cooler conditions and weather slowed its spread once again. By July 3, 2 weeks after the evacuation order, residents were allowed to return. The warm and dry weather returned early in July, with lightning strikes sparking several new fires. On July 8th and 9th, one of these fires sparked a few kilometers west of Labrador City, the second largest town in Labrador. Initially, it was just a smoldering ground fire, but by July 12th, the warm, dry wind changed everything. The fire traveled 21 kilometers in just 4 hours, growing aggressively from 600 hectares to 10,000 by the end of one day. An evacuation order for the town of 7,000 residents was issued at 5:30 p.m., and the population once again was being directed towards Happy Valley and Goose Bay. More than 1,000 vehicles crawled along the 529-kilometer trek, passing through Churchill Falls near the halfway point, which had all too recently experienced its own evacuation. Long lines formed at single gas stations there, the only gas station in town, I should say. It extended its hours to stay open all night to aid the travelers. The influx of evacuees effectively doubled the population of Happy Valley, Goose Bay, but they rose to the occasion. Merciful rains followed in the days. The evacuation order was rescinded on July 22nd, just 10 days later. Canada saw 5.3 million hectares of forest burned in 2024, more than double the national average of 2.1 million hectares, but certainly much lower than the 14 or something million that were known to have burned in 2023. Well, that's a little look at some of the worst weather stories in Canada for the year 2024. I hope you enjoyed that. Hit like, share, subscribe, tell a friend. Joey Only Caribou Weather Dude. It's your YouTube channel right here, friends. We hope to see you soon back on here. Become a member, become a Patreon, or just keep coming back and watching. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next time. Bye now.